you. That first question and answer there where he goes, if you saw that he was gurgling blood and you saw that he was cold, why did you ask if he was okay? She responds, I was in shock. That's a perfect example of what I mean. Why would you ask that question? That's not helping your case really in any way, unless you can think of something that he might be trying to establish here. Maybe something that has to go with her state of mind or the fact that maybe she was intoxicated as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that question?
You have to remember something. The defense here has a job to do, and that's to put on the best kind of defense that they have, given the circumstances. And if they're alleging, self-defense, down the line, in their case in chief, they're going to have to introduce information that's consistent with what they're saying. And now, I do agree with you. That question, in just respect and just looking at it, could come off kind of strange. But there could be more that this defense attorney is trying to grapple with, like possibly, cementing on self-defense in his case.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you because he's been so adamant about going after the woman, and we talked about needing to be careful under those circumstances, but he has not backed off. So maybe there's something there. He's got a feather in his cap he's going to bring out a little later. One thing he did really well, I thought, was we saw the punch, and the punch is definitely sort of a bad fact, a bad look for the defense. But right after the punch, Theodore Edgecomb goes on his bike and rides away. And he got her to admit, at that point, he was no longer a threat to her as they're leaving, or a threat to them. And she admits, no, he's no longer a threat. So my question to you is, once you get that out of this witness, it really then boils down to what happened. So does it take out of the equation the punch? The fact that she could see that he was no longer a threat. Now, the fact that he may have instigated it with the punch almost gets taken out of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, listen, it goes both ways. These, they were tussling back and forth. And I think one of the biggest things for this jury to consider is, given all of that, given this altercation, was this self-defense or was this, a homicide? And ultimately, that's a tussle there. And I do think to some extent, that punch, there's a lot to be said about that. But also, what's the moment that led to the killing? That's some of the most important information there is, because that's going to tell you a lot about whether this lethal force was adequate or it was not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we know it was adequate, whether it was appropriate, right? That's the question,
yeah,
right?
Appropriate.
The issue here also is the distance of the shooting. We heard testimony from the medical examiner about that today. What role do you think that might have in the case? Who does it help? The fact that they said the shooting could have happened anywhere between a few inches and a couple of feet. We have the video, so we can kind of see. It's a little weird, the angle, so you can't tell exactly how close they are. But how important is the distance?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that they're going to have to show in any kind of self-defense is that he thought that he was, lethal force was possibly going to be used upon him, or he had to, disturb any of that. And ultimately, that distance is where both sides are going to argue, was good for them or was possibly bad for them. The defense is going to say, that distance shows that this isn't like an execution style, and ultimately the prosecution is going to try and say this distance is too close. That doesn't really seem, amenable. It seems like he really got in there to really go for something. And so both sides are going to try to grapple with it. But I do think the existence of it and in this stage is very important information for this jury.
All right, finally, one quick question for you. Do you think he had, as a reasonable person, it was reasonable for him to think under those circumstances that deadly force was necessary?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's a lot more here, and I don't think lethal force, it should have ever gotten a lethal force, and nothing prompted it.
Yeah, that's the big issue. I think that's a real problem for this defense. All right, Matthew, stand by. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we know Theodore Edgecomb